everything happens for a reason. She's in a better place. Where she is, she wouldn't come back, even if she could. God has a plan. These are all expressions you've probably heard at some point in your life. Maybe even you've used them at some point in your life. They're part of that toolkit that our culture gives us to take to funerals and wakes and visitations. We drive to these places with the emotions in our mind, the grief that we're feeling for the lost person and the sympathy we're feeling for the people who loved them. And then we get to the funeral and we see the people mourning, their chests ripped open in grief, and we kind of freak out a little bit. We think, oh, what if I say the wrong thing? What if I upset them? What if I make them cry? So we go right back to that toolkit and say, well, if I just tell them God has a plan, I won't make them cry, I won't upset them, they're expecting it. Won't get them upset, won't make them angry, I won't get yelled at. Which is probably what my mom's friend thought right before I yelled at her. My mom died very suddenly at age 61. I was 35 years old. I was about to start a research project on social support for widows at midlife. And then suddenly, my dad was a widower at midlife. I grew up in a Christian Midwestern family where individual grit and a reliance on God is all you really need. So it wasn't really a surprise that I started hearing those kind of vaguely religious expressions of God's plans and people being in better places. And at first I kind of shrugged it off a little bit. I said, well, yeah, my mom was religious, so she's probably in heaven, that's cool. But after a while, it started to set my jaw in a clench because I didn't want to hear it anymore. I didn't want to be told about better plans and better places. And by the 500th time I heard it, I lost it. So my mom's friend very kindly said, just trust that God has a plan. And I said, yeah, well, you know what? Then God's plan really sucks. And a deathly silence followed. Death puns are okay, they're funny. And everyone just stood stock still before her friend, my mom's friend says, oh, yeah, it sucks. Yeah, it does, and I'm sorry. And she quickly made her escape. And then everyone else stood awkwardly by, waiting to know if they were next. In the years that have followed my mom's death, I've thought a lot about social support. I researched social support. I did that study on midlife widows. I enact social support. I help others enact social support. It's part of who I am now. So the purpose of my TED Talk is to share with you a little bit more about what I've learned through my lived experience as well as my research to help us do better than that toolkit, to create social support that doesn't get you yelled at, but gets you respect and gratitude instead. As a professor, the first thing I need to do is to tell you some definitions, right? So I want to define for you what social support is. I define social support as the communication, both verbal and nonverbal, that we use to help people in our lives who are going through a problem or some sort of trouble. Those could be little things. You've had a bad day at work, you had a fight with a friend, you got a fender bender. Or they can be the huge things, a serious illness diagnosis, COVID, for example. It could be a divorce, or yes, the death of somebody we love that leads us to grief. Research tells us that most people believe themselves to have a really broad network of people that they could call on at any moment who would provide social support to them. And this resonates with me. I do have a large network of people who could support me, and when my mom died, many of them showed up, and I was grateful for it. But research also tells us that the enacted support that people actually receive is not always seen as super helpful, right? How do you feel about the enacted social support you receive? People go, it's either only moderately helpful, sometimes it's actually harmful. You wanted emotional validation and you got advice that made you feel dumb or small. So what's the gap? We all know we have it available. We want to offer it, but somewhere in between there, things get a little lost. I have a couple of things in mind that I want to share with you that I think can help you bridge that gap, to create a new, renewed toolkit that you can take with you to make people feel better when they're experiencing problems. The first thing that we need to consider is, to quote The Life of Brian by Monty Python, "You're all individuals." Nerds? No? Okay. As a band geek, we all watch those? No. We all know ourselves to be individual people. We know we have complex experiences, our own personal histories, our own values and beliefs and ways of being in the world. But when it comes to social support, people forget that. And they offer support not for you as a person, but for the situation that you're in, or for the kind of broader category of who you are, not who you are. Research also follows through with this. A lot of times researchers will say, okay, so if you have a friend who's experiencing grief, how would you socially support them? And people dutifully do their work. They answer their surveys, they fill out their questionnaires and say, well, this is what I would say. And we get these kind of generalized ideas about what people would say if a friend was going through grief. And it's broadly helpful. It tells us a lot to kind of give us some scope. But if you ask me, if you have a friend who's going through grief, what would you say? I say, I don't know. Which friend? What do I know about this friend? How do they organize their world? What's their belief system? Have they experienced anything like this before? Psychologists tell us that we have a schema system, right? It's the way we organize all of our experiences. We take a new experience and we say, okay, how does this compare to what I've experienced before? What is this like? What is this not like? And we build it into a kind of filing cabinet. Our brains are filled with walls and walls of elaborate filing cabinets. And so when people say, how would you socially support a friend who's going through grief? The friend that they're talking about is a drawer. They say, okay, go to the drawer for friend. But don't go any further than that, just go to that drawer and point at it. But what I'm telling you is that instead of just going to the drawer, open it. Inside that drawer are a bunch of folders, a folder for every person you know. And inside that folder, there's artifacts, items of things you know about them, things you've experienced around them. All the stuff that makes them that you know about is organized in that folder. That's how you offer social support, by digging into the folder. When Mom died, people saying those things was not digging into my folder. All they were doing was saying, oh, you're a person in his grief, so I will say this. And it didn't work. However, for my dad, when told that she's in a better place and wouldn't come back even if she could, he's a really devout Christian man. He was like, yeah, you're right, that does help me, knowing she's in heaven. For me, all I heard was, you think my mom doesn't love me enough to be here with me? You think she's choosing there instead of here with me? And I also knew from my schema system about them that they didn't mean any harm, right? It was a part of their belief system. So that's why I kept my mouth shut. And the person to whom I expressed the outrage that I felt was somebody I knew from my schema system would handle it, who wouldn't be offended by it if I lashed out. It was safe. So the big important thing for you to think about here is that social support isn't about generalities, it's about personalities. You have to offer support that fits the personality of the person that you're talking to. And there's a second correlating factor. They're an individual, you're an individual, and you're in a relationship together. And so when research will talk about how would you support a friend who's going through grief to make them feel better, it's reducing the complexity of the individual, but it's also reducing the complexity of the relationship. Every relationship is as unique as every single individual. There's an old show that was on TV a while back called The Mindy Project, and in one episode, a colleague asked Mindy about, who's your best friend? And she goes, oh, Danny. Best friend isn't a person. Best friend is a tiering system. Right? And it's a joke, but I'm also like, yeah, no, that's actually true. Yeah, way to go, Mindy, right? We all have different best friends. I have a college best friend, a childhood best friend, a current best friend, a workplace best friend. We call our romantic partners our best friends, right? All of those people fall under the category of best friend as a relationship, but each of those people have a different connection to us, a way of being an us with us. And so when we're thinking about social support, we have to combine what we know about ourselves as individuals with what we know about us as these people. When my mom died, I had to not only figure out how to support myself and get myself through dealing with her loss, I also had to figure out, how am I now a sister to my brother? How am I now a daughter to my father? My dad and I have always been a lot alike. We both love to talk, hate shutting up. We love debates, philosophy. We would drive home from Grandpa and Grandma's house in the car at night on Sundays and have these grand theoretical debates about the universe. That's who we were. It was always very easy to communicate with him. Even in my teen years, when my mom and I didn't know if we could get along, he and I were pretty smooth sailing. When my mom died, that all changed. We had really different ways of coping with our grief. And so I didn't know what to do anymore. I didn't know how to relate to this man, and he didn't know how to relate to me either. And so no research, no typology of father and daughter is going to really understand how we struggled in supporting one another, and then eventually kind of got past that to reconnect in the years following my mom's death. My brother and I, on the other hand, are about as different as can be. My brother does not like emotions, and I like them all. And I'll use them all daily in rapid succession. Don't tempt me, right? My brother doesn't really like talking. He's a man of brevity. And I, again, like my dad, don't know when to quit. It comes into my head, it goes out my mouth. So dealing with him, I not only had to think about who am I as an individual, who is he as an individual, but how does that work then for me as his younger sister? How do I support him as an individual within the framework of us as siblings who'd grown up together, had the same parents, were experiencing the same kind of loss of our mom? And I figured it out. Shortly after mom died, he calls me at 10 a.m. every Saturday, and I mean 10 a.m. And at the end of the conversation, in predictable fashion, he would say, okay, well, I'll call you next week. And I would say, okay, sounds good, talk to you then. And we would hang up the phone. And after mom died, I thought, this is it. This is a way for me to use social support in a way that makes sense for him, that shows him I care about us as well as about him. So my brother would say, okay, well, I'll call you next week. And I'd say, okay, sounds good. Talk to you then. Love you. And the first couple of weeks, he's like, oh, yeah, love you too, huh? Because it was awkward. We hadn't done it before. Not that he didn't love me, he just didn't like to say it. Over the years, that has become the thing that we do to remind each other every week that we care, that we're connected. A while back, I forgot. I was spacing out, thinking about other things, probably playing games on my phone, don't tell him. And he said, okay, I'll call you next week. And I said, okay, sounds good, talk to you then. And after a few seconds of silence, he goes, yeah, love you too. Like, oh, golly, we're good. So I said, oh, I love you, I do, I love you. And we laughed about it, and off we went. And I have literally never forgotten since, because that's what we do. All of this points to the fact that no relationship typology, no category of relationship is going to tell us what to do in a particular relationship. We have to do that work to analyze those things. So your toolkit now is a filing cabinet, not a box that you carry around. And you say, okay, well, that's fine. But that sounds way more complicated. Like, somebody needs social support. I can't just stare at them while my brain sorts through my schema system. I have to say something. Yes, you do. First of all, remember, your brain moves super fast. Your brain starts rifling through that filing cabinet like nobody's business the moment it knows it needs to go into action. But the second thing is, you don't have to go right out the gate with the support message. You can communicate. Ask them questions. Tell me more about what led to this happening. How are you feeling about what's happening? What's going on around with, how are other people helping you? Like, what do I need to know about this situation so that I can, understand it better? So then you're multitasking with your brain to figure out, what do I need to know from my folder about this person? What do I need to know about my relationship folder with this person in order to deliver a message that's actually going to resonate with them and us right now? So we remember that social support is not about generalities, it's about personalities. But it's also not a moment, it's a conversation. Our first thing out our mouth shouldn't be social support. It should be leading to social support. If people at my mom's funeral had done this more often, it might have gone better. Fewer shouts. If they had said, Dena, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, this is so bad, I'm so sorry, what can I say to you right now? My first thought would be, bring her back, please. Nobody's magic. So then the next best thing is, tell me a story about her. What are you going to remember about her in the days ahead? Why was she important to you? The people who did that, who took the time to tell me a story about my mom, they were the people who gave my heart a flotation device after the iceberg crash that was my entire life. Those were the people who gave me something to move forward with. If they had lost a parent themselves, I could have said, tell me how you survived, because I don't think I'm going to. Because even if they had said, I don't know, you just do, at least I would have known I'm not crazy for being crazy. I'm not nuts to have no idea what's even going to happen in an hour. That's what needs to happen. That's what your new toolbox looks like. It's figuring out, who is this person? Who are we together? How can I learn more to figure out what support should look like for this person in this situation? And no, it isn't as easy as pulling a script out of a toolbox. But I will leave you with a paraphrase of the Dread Pirate Roberts. Social support isn't easy, and anyone who tells you it is either lying or trying to sell you something. Thank you.